Thank you, Canyon City, for showing up for our regular city council meeting for June 6th. We're really happy to have you here. I'd like to start with a roll call, please.
Good evening, everyone. Councilmember Dennehy.
Here.
Councilmember Schmischer.
Here.
Councilmember B. Smith.
Here.
Councilmember Stein.
Here.
Councilmember Tracy.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Here.
Mayor Smith.
Here. Can we please have Luke Kennedy from the Vineyard Canyon Church come up to offer our invocation, and then we will have the Pledge of Allegiance. Let's all please rise.
Jesus, thank you for this group that's here tonight. God, thank you that you have put godly men and women to lead our city. And I pray that tonight as they gather and discuss, that you would give them wisdom, that you'd give them grace for one another. And God, we do pray that you would continue to guide our city as we face the challenges ahead. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Kathy, come on up. We're going to swear you in. I'm really excited to welcome you to District 2.
Hi.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Kathy Worthington,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the United
the
States,
Constitution and the laws
the Constitution and the laws
of the state of Colorado,
of the state of Colorado,
and the charter,
and the charter,
ordinances,
ordinances,
laws, and regulations
laws, and regulations
of the city of Canyon City,
of the city of Canyon City,
and will faithfully perform
and will faithfully perform
the duties of the office
the duties of the office
upon which I am about to enter,
upon
upon which I am about to enter
upon of which I am about to enter
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability, which I just proved.
And I just need you to sign.
Okay. Get it.
Congratulations, Kathy, and welcome to the council. We usually reserve the very beginning of city council meeting for anyone to address council. If they have anything they'd like to say that is not on the regularly scheduled agenda, you're welcome to do so at this time. Seeing none, we'll move on to council member announcements. While we're waiting for announcements, I do want to say a special thank you to the Prison Museum. The Prison Museum hosted the Ghost Walk tours for Canyon City's 150th anniversary for the first Friday, our feature Friday, and it was an amazing, amazing success. They have like an average of about 100 people per tour, starting from 5 every 30 minutes till 7, so it was pretty awesome, and really thankful for the Prison Museum and their board and staff for making that happen free to our community. Councilmember Schmischer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also just wanted to mention that in addition to this being our city's sesquicentennial year, it's the Fremont Center for the Arts 75th anniversary this month, which I think is a pretty remarkable occasion worth noting as well.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to remind everybody, we do have a general government committee meeting Wednesday, June 8th at 5 p.m. in these chambers. We're going to be talking about chronic nuisances, the city charter, and the path forward on homelessness.
Awesome,
Is that-
thank you.
I think I have that right.
Yeah, and the path forward on homelessness is a newly amendment to the agenda. Okay, let's move on to our consent agenda. Ryan Stephens, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. Item 8A is the approval of minutes for May 16th, the regular city council meeting, and May 18th, the vision committee meeting. 8B, awards bid 3722 police staff vehicles to City Auto Plaza in an amount not to exceed $19,500. And 8C is to receive and file a list of bills.
Any questions for Ryan? If there aren't, I'd like to entertain a motion. Councilmember Smith.
Madam Mayor and Council, I move to approve the consent agenda as written.
Second.
Any discussion? I'll call a vote, please.
Councilmember Dennehy.
Aye.
Councilmember Worthington.
Aye.
Councilmember Schmisher.
Aye.
Councilmember B. Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Stein.
Aye.
Councilmember Tracy.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Aye.
Thank you, council. Thank you, staff. We'll now move on to item 10A, and this is the second reading and adoption by title only of ordinance 4.
Administrator's report.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Ryan.
That's all right.
I'm just eager to get going.
We're ready to get going. For the administrative report, you have the written report in the packet, some additional notes on the report. We have received word that the city will be receiving a CDOT grant to help with some additional improvements on Main Street at the 300 block. So that will be built into the budget for next year. Crews are still working on storm cleanup. It's taken just about all of our public works departments in order to help clean up after the storm. So that work continues. We still getting calls about some of the down trees and tree branches in the right of way. So we're handling those as they come. And then was able to take a tour of the St. Cloud Hotel today at all the construction activity that's going on over there. The back section where the kitchen for the restaurant was, that has all been demolished, and obviously as people drive by they see that a lot of the siding has been taken off on that first floor. So things are moving along, and very exciting to finally see some progress happening on St. Cloud from the outside. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Do we have an update on the Saint Scholastica? Have they broken ground there yet? Or I understand that's imminent.
Yeah, so I believe there were construction vehicles there for the 13 homes on the northern part of the property. So that part is moving forward and continuing to work. We actually had a meeting on St. Scholastica for the balance of the property today as well. So a lot of progress and good things moving forward there.
Councilmember Schmisher.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Administrator Stevens, could you please clarify if folks still have downed tree branches in the right-of-way in front of their house, are they supposed to call in at this point, or is the city still going around to pick them up?
Well,
Thanks.
we're working in a grid format, so if city crews have already been through your neighborhood and there's miss something, please give us a call and let us know.
Thank you.
Councilmember Smith.
I just had a question on the Holiday Hotel demolition and when that's starting.
Oh, the motel on 15th and
Yes.
yep. They have not pulled a demo permit yet, so
Okay.
at this point, I can't answer that question. I believe there's still some asbestos abatement that needs to take place, and I don't know that that's taken place yet.
Thank you.
Any further questions? All right, thank you, Ryan. We will now move on to 10A, second reading and adoption by title only of Ordinance 4, Series of 2022, an ordinance of the City of Canyon City in amending Title 10 of the Canyon City Municipal Code by the addition of a new Chapter 10.10 concerning utility terrain vehicles.
This is a second reading. After the last meeting concerning this, it was tabled. We had a stakeholder meeting on April 26th to discuss several issues with and concerns about the ordinance. There was an introduction, discussion about sunset of the ordinance. There was a lot of discussion around that between a 1 year versus a 3-year sunset. After deliberation with the various stakeholders, settled on 18 months as that sunset period. City permitting was taken out of the ordinance at one point. This has been, there was a lot of discussion about that and was added back into the version that you have here in front of you, including stickers on the front and rear of the vehicles. Those would be required. Changing the start of legal operation from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. That was one of those suggestions to keep the noise down early in the morning. Prohibition of UTV rentals. This is actually addressed in the second ordinance that we'll be discussing tonight through a moratorium. And then having 2 separate fee schedules, one for residents and one for non-residents. So that is something that will be brought back as a resolution before this gets enacted, if it gets enacted. The beginning date would be August 1st. Happy to answer any questions. We do have Commander Bell here from the PD if there are PD-related questions. And of course, Catherine may have some legal advice.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have kind of a legal question under the permit required. Right now, our draft language is a permit by the city is required to operate a UTV in the city. Permits are valid for 1 calendar year from the date of issuance. Each UTV must have a permit. Since we have a sunset in the ordinance, isn't it better to line up that paragraph with the sunset provision and say are valid until January 31st of 2024? The idea, there's a couple of ideas behind that suggestion, that it will cut down a little bit on the workload on our police department, and if the ordinance does sunset, then we don't have permits extending beyond when permits are valid.
So legally, I think it's fine either way. I think it's a matter of policy for council. I don't know if Ryan has an opinion on that or not, but either way is fine.
Do you have a comment, Ryan, or do you have a druthers?
Yeah, I don't know offhand how to respond to that one. I think having an annual permit and, the expectation, if the sunset is extended, the expectation is still that you'd have annual permitting fees. So I guess if I had my druthers, it would be an annual basis just to stay consistent over the long term, assuming it, if it is approved beyond that first initial 18 months.
So if we have an annual permit and our next sunset period would likely be for 18 months, is that, it's going to be at the pleasure of council at that
Correct.
time, right?
Yes.
So that's kind of an unknown, if the ordinance is extended, what type of sunset date we would have. Well, if the if the police department doesn't mind, getting kind of doubled up on the permits. At least time and a half,
Yeah,
anyway.
I think from a procedural standpoint, keeping it on an annual basis and having that expectation makes the most sense.
Well, and if we have to, we can prorate the next purchase.
Yeah, the other aspect of that is not everybody's going to sign up on the first day. So, it's going to be a year from when they get their permit.
Okay.
Councilmember Worthington.
I'm the new kid, and I'm not sure what I should be saying, but I do welcome being here. I'm glad to be here. I hope that I continue to offer some insight and some experiences through my many years. So I appreciate being here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Councilmember Schmischer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have 3 different comments to make. I think the easiest one is I think that we may need to add in other CDOT roads in section 1010-050, given that we don't specify that UTVs are not allowed to operate on CDOT roads. I think we just need to make sure that that's a very comprehensive list. So that's point number 1. The only other one I can think of is Rainbow Drive.
That is
to add
correct,
in there.
yes.
Okay.
And
And then
Ken, I was just going to piggyback on that. Section A, when it talks about those roads, can it clarify that they cannot operate on these roads because they are CDOT?
Weren't we saving that for like a procedural manual rather than the ordinance?
There will be marketing information about what roads they cannot be on, and this says that in, I guess, legal speak.
Yeah, I mean, we can say, because they're CDOT and add that language in, but I don't know how meaningful that is to a member of the public. Because, I didn't know until maybe 6 hours ago that Rainbow Drive was a CDOT controlled road. I'm not sure every member of the public's going to understand that. So I think it's easier to actually just make sure we identify them all. That's my opinion.
All right, well, I just thought both, so that there's an understanding. Why? Why can't I drive on Rainbow Drive? Well, it's because it's a CDOT road. There's that clarification. And on that manual, will it also have actual city boundaries so that people won't go into county as well?
Yes, so the marketing materials, everything that we would put out would have, a map of the city boundaries, as well as the prohibited roads.
Okay, back to you, Councilmember Schmischer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My 2 other comments were related to 1010-010 definitions. B, where it states that public road shall mean any road, street, alley, avenue, thoroughfare, public way, or other public property, unless otherwise posted as prohibiting UTVs within the city. I guess I'm a little bit concerned because we do have city-owned trails and we do have city-owned parks, and I think as it's currently written, UTVs would then be allowed to operate in those spaces where I don't think that, based on what we've heard from the UTV owners, I don't think that that's the intent. And I don't think we would necessarily want to go around to every city park to post signs that you can't drive UTVs on the city park grass. So I would just think that we may want to add a sentence at the end that states that UTV usage on trails and parks within the city shall only be permitted on areas marked as UTV permitted, or something that clarifies that you can't drive your UTV on city parks or on city trails.
And I think right now that, I'm not sure, but I thought I saw something that says that there's, like down on that there is no motorized vehicles and that down on our paths.
I think so on places like the Riverwalk, but I think on like just a city park, as it's currently written in the definition, it's any city public property, which I correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Sellers, but I think that would include city parks.
I wouldn't say that's necessarily what was intended in that statement, but I think it could go both ways. And so I think clarifying it is a good idea. And if I can ask a follow-up question, you do have city parks outside the city. And so I just need direction on whether UTVs would be allowed in those city parks. So if you make this change.
So I guess, I think because there's been a lot of thought and consideration as to which parks and trails UTVs are appropriate for based on how they were built, that it makes more sense to opt them in than opt them out, is all I'm trying to say. And then my last one, which I think I'm thinking will spawn the most discussion, is I'm concerned about the moratorium by its very nature, because as I understand from the city attorney, moratoriums are supposed to be temporary in nature, and we really shouldn't have a period for this temporary moratorium of beyond 6 months. But at the same time, we're proposing an 18-month initial sunset on our UTV ordinance. So I'm concerned that those two don't line up, and that then we wouldn't really be giving the UTV ordinance a fair shake, because there potentially could be this thing that comes in 6 months after the fact that significantly changes the nature of the game. So I have a rather simple and I think elegant solution. If in section 1010.030 permitted acts, we just say it shall be lawful to operate a private non-commercial UTV on all public roads within the city. That way we don't have to get into moratoriums on businesses, and we don't have to have a whole separate ordinance that we have to keep track of every 6 months, whether or not we want to extend that one. And instead, we can just craft this ordinance to really be what it's supposed to be about, which is operating private non-commercial UTVs on city, on public roads within the city. I think it would be pretty easy, given that we have a local permitting process, to ensure that within that permitting process we specify what constitutes a private non-commercial vehicle and what proof you have to show that your vehicle is a private non-commercial vehicle to get the permit. And since we're requiring the stickers on the front and the back, you would then be the city law enforcement and concerned citizens would then be able to call in if they saw any that didn't have those permitting stickers. So just for discussion, I wanted to throw that idea out there, and I don't know, Ms. Sellers, if you had an immediate response to it.
Sure. So let me back up just a second and talk about the moratorium. So you have the power to issue a moratorium. The length of the moratorium is where the law gets a little gray. There's kind of a general consensus with courts that 6 months is some kind of magic number. It's not to say that it can't be extended. It absolutely can be. But if challenged, a court's going to want to see that you're actively working towards addressing whatever issue that you impose the moratorium on. And if you're not doing anything, you could possibly lose that challenge to a moratorium. And so that's what Councilmember Schmisser is talking about, is that there's kind of, you know, you can extend it. They like to see 6 months, but it's really, there's no law out there that says it's 6 months and it's nothing else. So that's, you should just understand that. I think that the suggestion is a good one. If you would prefer to take care of the issue that way instead of taking care of the kind of commercial use of property to rent UTVs through the moratorium. And my suggestion is, if you're gonna go that way, that the definition of private non-commercial UTV actually be in the ordinance, and the details about, you know, what kind of evidence is required can be in the permitting system. That doesn't need to be in the ordinance. I think the only real, there might be a few holes in enforcement on that as the ordinance kind of plays out. And I think it's mostly going to be from out of state, or, you know, people who have UTVs that might be licensed in, let's say, an entity. And maybe it's an entity they own and operate, and they're not renting UTVs, but they're from Texas. And so PD is going to be in a position to have to try to figure that out, because, you know, you can hold a vehicle in an LLC. The people driving the vehicles won't always be the operator. We don't make the operator as the only driver and that kind of thing. So there might be some kind of practical, I think, enforcement issues with that. But we can legally certainly add it if you would like us to.
Thank you so much for providing that really clear and concise explanation. Personally, I think that it would solve us a lot of headaches and difficulties by adding that in, and I think that it would better meet the intent of, I think, some of the compromises that that the city tried to strike between the various stakeholder groups. I would like to just commend everyone for taking such active part in this process and really, coming forth with your ideas and your concerns, and then also Administrator Stevens and the city staff for bringing everyone together and trying to find these middle grounds. I just think that having that specified in the ordinance as opposed to having a separate temporary moratorium would be a cleaner and better meet the intent of the proposed compromise.
Thank you. Next we have Councilmember Worthington. Just a second, Ryan.
I'm sorry.
You need to
There was another point that she brought up, so I want to make sure that we address that before we get too far down the road, which was section 1010.010, item B, excluding parks and trails. Catherine, could we address that by just striking "or other public property" and changing public way to public right-of-way?
Yes?
Okay.
Thank you, Administrator Stevens. That's a much more elegant solution to that one.
All right, now, Councilmember Worthington.
Well, now that I've found how to let you know I wanted to say something. Oops.
Yep.
Now you can hear me. I just wanted to get back to where you were talking about the trails and so forth. Living in Dawson Ranch, we have trails that are city-owned, and I would like to emphasize a way of making sure that the residents of Dawson Ranch and others don't go zipping along those trails, because they are meant to be walking and perhaps bicycles. So however we can do to clear that up or make it more understandable would be appreciated.
Thank you. Ryan?
I think we might have our boxes switched. I think Councilwoman Tracy was also trying to make a statement.
Yes.
I'm being silenced.
I'm just reading what comes on my thing. So now I'm going to have to, think extra hard. All right, Councilmember Tracy.
Well, I had 3 questions or comments originally. Now I've got 5 or 6, I think, based on all that's been said so far. Wanted to say back to what Councilmember Hamrick was saying, that perhaps we could, well, when you think about it, when we get close to the end, if we approve, if we pass an ordinance with an 18-month sunset provision, that I would assume as we get pretty close to the end of that 18 months that we'll have some sense of what direction we're going to go. And if for some reason we decide that is the end of the experiment, we could, I assume, administratively just extend those calendar year permits 1 more month, and then whatever happens, happens. So I just want to throw that in. I have 3 other things, but I guess I'm not completely clear on the language you were suggesting, Councilmember Schmitzer, about commercial vehicles, because we're talking about, in the other ordinance that we haven't dealt with yet, we're talking about UTV sales, rental, repair businesses. So I'm not sure it's going to quite fit. In other words, maybe we need to see a definition first of how that might solve it.
Could I, sorry, just before you move on to your next one, could I try to say it a slightly different way?
I'm sorry?
Before you move on to your next one, do you mind if I just address that comment?
Okay.
So my understanding from the UTV meeting and from Administrator Stevens' memo was that one of the issues was the potential for UTV rentals and UTV businesses to cause an influx of UTVs on our roads. So I think that was one of the concerns that the stakeholder group brought forward. So the idea was that by having a moratorium on UTV sales and UTV rental businesses, you could potentially mitigate that concern. My proposal was to just say that it shall be lawful to operate private non-commercial UTVs on all public roads, to really go directly to the concern that the citizens had raised in terms of wanting to ensure that it was just the stakeholders who had brought forward the issue of wanting to be able to drive their own private non-commercial UTVs on the roads and not open up floodgates to rental businesses and sale businesses. So I think that's, I hope that helps clarify.
to me, there's a little bit of apples and oranges there, but I'll just let that sit for a minute. I do want to get to the original questions I had. My first one is under safety and equipment, so it's section 10.10.040, I think, if I'm reading it right. Under letter D, the wording, I think, maybe needs a slight amendment there. It says safety belts as defined by CRS, and it gives the site as amended, are required if safety belts are installed on the UTV. Is it intending to say safety belts should be used if they are installed? It just seems like the wording is a little off there. It's kind of circular.
Yeah, so all of the, all of those items, if you're operating, you have to comply with that. So yes, all of those items in that section, the helmets, the eye protection, the safety belts, all have to be used if you are operating a UTV on city streets. So yes. that's
Okay, it
what
doesn't say use, though. It
Yeah,
says
but-
equipped with. So that's where I'm thinking there's a missing word, maybe.
Oh, okay.
So we might want to just think about that. And then under that same section, item F, where it's talking about one red tail lamp being required as equipment. And then at the very end of that, it says that are actuated upon application of foot brake. I think that's two different things. A tail light is different from a brake light. And we're sort of lumping them all together there. And I'm not sure what we want or don't want, but I, again, think the language is unclear there.
Okay.
And then my other question just has to do with section 10.10.060, violations. And maybe because I'm not an attorney, but I'm not clear, if we're having all of these requirements in the ordinance, when it comes to violations, well, the only thing that we're really spelling out there is Title 42 of the state statutes, speeding, or allowing another person to drive. And so I'm not sure, how do we handle then these other local requirements
I
if
think
they
the-
can't be violations?
I think the purpose was that we went with the state law, and we didn't try to change the law that the state has already set forth. That's why everything refers to Colorado Revised Statutes.
But also C in the violation section covers any violation of that chapter, not
But
just speeding.
C is only applying, though, to, it says it shall be unlawful for any person to allow, authorize, et cetera, a UTV owned or belonging to him or her, or that is under his or her control to be operated by any other person in violation. So I'm just asking about violations when you're not allowing someone else, it's you.
Okay.
And I'm just not.
So it's not your UTV is what you're asking, you're just operating it.
That it's yours and you're operating it. So, in other words, I guess a simpler way to ask my question is, what can and will local law enforcement enforce in our ordinance if we pass it? What will they issue citations for? What are violations? Is it only what's listed there in section 060?
So yes, but the intent is that the chapter is, any violation of the chapter will also be enforced.
Right.
And we can clarify that in section C to catch everything, if you feel that's unclear.
So I'm sorry, if I may real quick. So Catherine, in section C, the way I'm reading that is, if I have a UTV and I let somebody else use it, and it's in violation of one of these provisions, I'm the one, as the owner of the UTV, that's going to be cited.
Yeah, because you're the permit holder. Yeah.
So just to kind of, again, make it clear, I guess, for me, and maybe another one or two people, I don't know. But back to the safety and equipment section, is there anything in that section that differs slightly from what's already in state statute?
Yes,
And then how do we enforce those differences? if we don't?
through that section C is what's intended to do that. And we can clarify that language to make it more clear, but
See, to me, C just applies to if you are letting someone else use your, I want to know what applies if you're driving your own UTV.
Sorry, doesn't the next one, 10.10.070A, any person convicted of a violation of this chapter shall be subject to? Like, doesn't that cover everything?
I don't want to speak for Councilmember Tracy, but I think her concern is that C imposes a violation on the owner when it's not being operated by the owner. That's your concern.
And yeah, and it doesn't address directly what happens when you are operating your own UTV.
Sure, and we can clarify that to, you know, that the operator's on the hook regardless of whether they're the owner or not.
Yeah.
Is that make?
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe. Okay.
I have a question going back to the seatbelt, saying that you have to wear a seatbelt if they're installed. Isn't there, I thought originally there was a requirement that there had to be seatbelts installed on the UTV.
I don't think they come without them.
I don't think they do anymore, but that's actually from the state statute, that language, so.
And I'm going to say, going back to 1010 on F, you know, with the headlamps, you know, the one rear light, usually those lights are a brake lamp as well on it. You know, the lights come on, and it's just the same as your car or a motorcycle. It's the same tail light is also functioning as the brake light as well. It
Right.
just becomes brighter.
It does vary from make to model and so forth, but I just wanted to be sure that the language was clear there. And, you know, you don't actuate your tail light with the brake pedal. You actuate your brake lights with that. I'll leave it at that. It's just a language issue.
Okay, so there's a number of suggested amendments to this second reading. Catherine, most of them I think can be taken care of in the reading of a motion, except for you had mentioned for 10-10-06 on clarifying the owner. Do we need to have that language when making a motion?
Yeah, I think we can take care of it. We might need to go from top to bottom just one more time, if that's okay with everyone. Just so we all are on it, we've bounced around a little bit.
So what I have so far is starting on page 1, 10-10-10B of changing the language to public road shall mean any road, street, alley, avenue, thoroughfare, or public right-of-way, strike, or other public property.
Correct.
Then 10-10-30, in the opening line, it shall be lawful to operate a private, non-commercial UTV, plus adding a definition of what a private, non-commercial UTV is.
I have a suggested definition.
Sure.
What number is that one?
10-10-30.
10-10-30, it's on the first page.
Permitted.
Oh.
What's your recommendation?
So a private, non-commercial UTV would be a UTV owned by an individual or an entity intended to be used by the owner of that UTV or that owner's approved users, but shall not include UTVs purchased with the intent to rent such UTVs as part of a commercial enterprise or for profit.
Does that definition need to be in that actual line?
No, back up
Or would that go under
into
definitions on the top?
10-10-0-0-1.
10-10-10?
10-10-10. Yeah, as, we can just stick it in C.
Okay. All right, then I have after that, 10-10-40D, safety belts as defined are required to be used if safety belts.
Yeah, just for consistency with the other ones, can I make a suggestion that we say safety belts as defined in CRS 42.4-236-1B as amended are required for UTV operators and passengers if safety belts are installed in the UTV?
I have a comment on that.
Uh-huh.
The problem is that we've got two subjects here. One is, one case is when a person has a UTV that came with an installed seat belt and removes it. Okay, and so I believe we have to require that UTVs, if they came equipped with seatbelts are so equipped if they're used on city streets. And the second subject then is use of that seatbelt by occupants.
Okay, so backing up just a little bit, are you suggesting that only UTVs installed with safety belts can be used on city streets? That's one.
No, I'm suggesting, no.
That was what I was thinking.
That's what I'm suggesting.
Okay, sorry. I
Well-
misunderstood.
Okay, then I am good with that. I don't have a problem with that. But I know that, sometimes people think, well, that's just excess equipment I don't need, and I can take that off and we'll be fine. But by making the prohibition or making the requirement that UTVs have seatbelts is fine with me.
So could we just delete if safety belts are installed on the UTV? So it would read, safety belts as defined, are required for UTV operators and passengers, period.
Sure.
Next is item F. Do we want to put at least one red tail brake lamp? Is that needed, or do you think that it's self-explanatory?
And unless people have taken them off, which is a very rare thing, and it's the same with the seatbelts. I don't know of anybody who would pull off. In fact, most of these people who have their UTVs, usually a lot of them even have 5-point harnesses in them. Nobody wants to get bounced around in a UTV without a seatbelt. But I believe almost every one that you buy nowadays, every one comes with a brake light and a light system on it.
So that's if you have a UTV from nowadays?
I think even going back, UTVs have always had lights on them.
But we're making sure that equipment is there.
So it's just a clarification. I mean, it's going to be standard, but at least there's no loophole.
So I
Yeah.
have a suggestion there, Madam
Yeah.
Mayor, that we modify the end of the statement, under normal atmospheric conditions, comma, with a brake lamp that is actuated upon application of the foot brake. And then that takes care of Councilwoman Tracy's concern.
Okay.
and-
Got it. And then the next one would be 10-10-50A, adding a fourth CDOT road, and that would be Rainbow Drive.
Mayor Smith?
And we,
Just to go back to your recommendation, I think it would be fairly simple to say in a UTVs, we need to add an S. UTVs shall be allowed to operate on all public roads within the city except CDOT roads which constitute the following, and then list them. Just so that folks do understand, we're not just picking random roads that make it more difficult for them to drive around.
Okay. All right, so UTV shall be allowed to operate on all public roads within the city except CDOT.
CDOT controlled public roads.
CDOT controlled public roads, except
Which include the following.
Then I think we've got a language problem.
So UTVs shall be allowed to operate on all public roads within the city except CDOT-controlled roads as follows.
As follows. Yeah.
That's better, including the addition of 4 Rainbow Drive.
Yes.
Down to 10-10-60, there was a question about clarifying the owner.
Operator as well as owner.
So my suggestion is it shall be unlawful for any person to operate, allow, authorize, suffer, or permit a UTV owned or belonging to him or her, or that is under his or her control, to be operated by the owner or other person in violation of this chapter.
Okay, so that is a culmination of suggested edits. I do have someone who would like to address City Council, and that would be Janelle Valadres. Sorry, please correct me.
That's quite all right. It's Janelle Valadares. It's really
Oh,
long.
wonderful, thank you.
So mostly I wanted to come and just thank you guys for taking the time to allow all the citizens to have some input into this. I know there's a group that have been working for a long time, and I appreciate that those of us that had concerns had the opportunity to come together so that we could, I think we came up with an ordinance that works better for more citizens. So I really appreciate that. I know that governing can be frustratingly slow, and so thank you. I had 2 changes, but I think you guys have already addressed them. I also wanted to bring up that I wanted it to be lawful to operate private UTVs, because as we'd heard, you know, folks, citizens of our town want to be able to make memories with their kids, they want to be able to get to work, they want to be able to have some fun, and I think it being for private UTVs meets that goal for both sides. And then the moratorium, I was gonna suggest that it match the sunset at 18 months, but I think that you guys have already addressed that by getting the private in there. It made more sense to me. You know, if it was only 6 months, you know, we might have a business that started up, and it would be really hard to impact that business if we decided to change it after that 18-month sunset. So it sounds like you guys have already addressed that, and that was it. So thank you so very much. I appreciate it.
And I do have a question. Where are you suggesting the language about the private owner of the UTV?
That was in, let's see, section 1010-030, where it says shall be permitted. And I was suggesting that where it says lawful to operate, it would say lawful to operate a private UTV or private non-commercial, as you guys brought up.
Yeah, so, same.
Yep.
Thank you for being a part of the process. I really feel a lot more comfortable with this ordinance.
Thank you.
I'm glad that it was tabled and it was improved upon, so thanks for being a part of that process.
I think so too. Thank you very much.
Next is Stuart Phelps.
I felt like I almost wanted to raise my hand, but the real thing about a UTV is the very first ones was the Polaris RZR, or people call it Razor. It began manufacture in mid-2007. Some of the very first ones actually became available to owners in 2007. That's the first ones. Everyone since then follows the same. And the very first ones was the 2008 RZR. It came fully, the only thing it doesn't have is turn signals, a horn, and airbags. It has, all of them have 2 taillights. Even the one single-person buggy called the Ace still has 2 taillights, 2 brake lights, and anytime the ignition switch is on, the taillights are on. They're fully equipped with low beams and high beams. They have just the right number of seats, and by putting the wording in, it says you can't add seats. That's smart. But seat belts should just follow the law that is like, that you could just simply put in that any equipment, any original equipment must be installed and in use. So that's your seat belt, the roll cage, the tail lights, the brake lights, everything else, because it's basically a car. And so I think that might save you some time there. The ownership question, remember that every one of these machines is also going to have a Colorado off-highway vehicle permit. And to get that, you have to submit your name, the VIN number, and basically prove that you own it. And that registration has to be with you at all times. So along with the permit you're going to have is that if an officer needs to stop someone, then all he has to do is look at that number, that sticker that's on the front, on the rear, that's your annual state sticker, ask you for the registration card. That's who the owner is. I think that's about it, because that's about all I can remember. Is there any other questions I might be able to answer?
Yeah, thank you for your clarifications and your expertise on the matter. We appreciate
Now,
it.
I think one other thing is helmets are not required in this state. Are they for under 18? I don't think
The
they are.
helmet clause reads, helmet use defined in CRS 42.4.1502 as amended is required for UTV operators and passengers unless a passenger is properly contained in a child restraint system and the UTV is designed to support a child restraint system.
So then the only person the helmet portion applies to is,
A minor without a child seat.
yes, okay. I don't have a problem with that. But I can't think of anybody would remove any of the equipment, like remove seatbelts. Yeah, I've seen one guy get thrown out of his, and that was the only time it took to get his attention.
But people do some pretty stupid things.
There are those out there, hopefully not in this group. But I think also the concern about, thinking about the concern of rental business and like that, I don't know that by allowing us to ride on the street, on the city streets and alleys and et cetera, you're gonna see a rental problem because there are just not that many trails around here. And certainly not ones you can drive to, because if you're gonna get to literally any of the trails around here, you're gonna be outside the city limits into the county. Well, then whoever wants to rent them is gonna have to provide transportation to any of those, and therefore there's no sense in starting the business here. So I'm hoping that probably won't be an issue. It won't be like Moab that is trying to limit the number because it is such a popular sport, and there it's right out of you're allowed to drive on everything except the interstate if you're licensed. That is a lot bigger issue.
Thank you, Stuart. Yeah, I think the addition of that is that reassurance to our citizens that it truly is just a local opportunity to allow UTVs.
And that's one of the reasons I question, is this just for us, or is someone coming in from Texas on vacation going to be able to get a permit and drive their UTV?
Yeah, they
on
can.
Canyon
They'll
City
just
Street?
have to get permitted and
But the
spend
thing is that
more
something,
money.
forgive me, we would like to allow? It's one of those, no, this is for Canyon City residents who want to use theirs to come to town for breakfast or to take a drive, rather than people coming to visit and say, oh, good, we can hot rod around town.
So in this ordinance, it allows for locals to get a permit, probably for $50. That would match Florence's fee. It also allows people from out of the city to get a permit, but that would be at a higher permit fee. And it would need to be a private, non-commercial UTV that they registered with the city.
Thank you.
Councilmember Stein.
Thank you, Mayor. Wasn't that, Ryan, an issue that was like it would be unconstitutional to block out-of-towners from getting a similar permit to the local one?
Yeah, actually, I'll let Catherine answer that, because that was one of the legal considerations.
Thank you.
So the answer is maybe. I'll just be upfront. The trick with UTVs that's going to make them so unique is that you can simply decide no more UTVs. They're not, in that sense, in the constitutional sense, they're not like cars or anything like that. It's purely a patchwork system of when they're allowed and where they're allowed and that kind of thing. And so we're never going to have any constitutional cases on UTVs, right? Colorado doesn't recognize the right to, the fundamental right to interstate travel is recognized in Colorado, but it's limited, and so intrastate travel is not protected in the 10th Circuit like it is in other circuits. And so the right to travel is kind of an odd constitutional right that's not often litigated, and so it's a little unclear, frankly, as to where the law lies. And so, you know, it could be challenged constitutionally. It's going to be subject to what's called a rational basis test, which is the lowest level of constitutional review. And so you just have to, you know, say that it's meeting a legitimate legislative objective. And if your legislative objective is to limit the number of UTVs on the street, and you don't want an influx of UTVs from outside your community, and this, you know, you have to go to define what that community is, right? Like, is it the city, is it the county, is it the state of Colorado? Then you will need to, one, express that in your ordinance that that's what you want to do, so that legislative objective is stated there, and then it's subject to whether or not the restriction you've put in place supports the limitation that you want to see. And so, you know, I mean, I think you can make that argument. You don't want an influx of UTVs. Now, I honestly can't tell you under the current case law whether or not that would fly. It might not. But again, the thing with UTVs is you can simply say, okay, no UTVs. Unlike you can't say no cars. And so it's a little bit of a trickier situation. So that's a really long kind of rambling answer. I apologize, but.
Thank you. So I think that what we try to do is not to put ourselves in a situation where we would have to face a litigation, and it's very expensive and time consuming. So I think maybe that's the reason that we did it this way.
And just to say, I know you guys say this all the time, you know, this is a test, I think, one. And two, with any law you pass, you can come back and tweak it and fix it if you see things you don't like or whatever. And so it's not static. It can adjust over time depending on what happens.
Thank you.
Councilmember Schmischer?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Councilmember Stein, for that question and also for that explanation, Ms. Sellers. I do think that that's really important, because it's good to know that if there is an influx of UTVs from outside of our community, that as part of the review at the sunset time period, we could then state the legislative intent of, we do not want to see an influx of UTVs from outside of our community, therefore we are not allowing UTVs from outside of the city of Canyon City or whatever it happens to be.
Well,
so thank you for that clarification.
Yeah. I don't think we even have to wait till the 18-month sunset. If there is a
think you'll probably
problem,
know
you can
pretty
address
fast.
it immediately. Yeah.
Thank you.
Is there any other further discussion from council? I would like to ask for a motion. I am going to read the amendments just for clarification. And so when you make that motion, you don't have to read all of those amendments again, but just say as amended or read by. So the first amendment would be 101010B. Public roads shall mean any road, street, alley, avenue, thoroughfare, or public right-of-way. Strike or other public property. Addition, C, with the definition of private, non-commercial UTV as defined by Catherine Sellers.
Would you like me to read that one more
Yes.
time? A UTV owned by an individual or entity and intended to be used by that owner of the UTV or that owner's approved users, and shall not include UTVs purchased with the intent to rent such UTVs as part of a commercial enterprise or for profit.
Thank you. Next is 101030. It shall be lawful to operate a private, non-commercial UTV. 101040D. Safety belts as defined, as amended, are required for UTV operators and passengers. Item F, on the second to the last line. Feet to the rear under normal atmospheric conditions, comma, with a brake light. So the addition is comma with a brake light.
And that might need just a couple more words. With a brake light, that is, and then we pick up with actuated upon application of the foot brake.
With a brake light, that is
Actuated.
actuated. Next, 101050A, UTVs shall be allowed to operate on all public roads within the city except CDOT-controlled public roads as follow.
Madam Mayor again.
Yeah?
That should say, within the city, comma, as follows. Because if we can't say, the exception then So you have to say as follows rather than except.
Well, it says UTVs shall be allowed to operate on all public roads within the city,
Except.
except as follows. You have to have an exception.
Are we adding in the language, on all CDOT controlled public roads?
Mhm. So within the city, comma, except CDOT controlled public roads as follows.
Oh,
And then,
there.
and then we're adding
Gotcha.
number 4, Rainbow Drive, right?
Yep, with an addition of number 4, Rainbow Drive.
Thank you for that. I understand now. Thank you.
Then 101060C, it shall be unlawful for any person to, with addition, operate, comma, and then on the bottom line, to be operated by, with the addition, the owner or, and that is it.
Madam Mayor and Council, I move to approve ordinance number 4, series of 2022 on second reading as amended.
I second.
There's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? I'll call a vote, please.
Councilmember Dennehy?
Aye.
Councilmember Worthington?
Aye.
Councilmember Schmisher?
Aye.
Councilmember B. Smith?
Aye.
Councilmember Stein?
Aye.
Councilmember Tracy?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick?
Aye.
Thank you, council. Thank you for the public and for the work of the public to make this ordinance. That would be a happy middle ground between both those that were for or against. And I'm glad to see that we're able to make a good compromise and a good ordinance, and we'll see how it goes. I also want to point out that this will not go into effect until August 1st, 2022. Councilmember Tracy?
That was just what I was going to say. I just wanted to clarify the effective date. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Tracy Worthington, can you try swapping your boxes and see if that solves our little question? Yeah. All right, so let's move on. I'm so sorry. B, and this is the introduction and first reading by title only of Ordinance 12, Series of 2022, entitled, "An Ordinance of the City of Canyon City Imposing a Temporary Moratorium on Uses that Involve the Sale, Rental, or Repair of Utility Terrain Vehicles." Now, it appears that this has already been taken care of by the amendment made for Ordinance 4. If council wants to see this moratorium still in place, then this is something we can still discuss and vote on, yay or nay. If council feels like they're comfortable with where we are, a motion doesn't even have to be made. Is that correct, Catherine?
I think we'd like you to vote it down,
You want it to be voted down? Okay.
just for clarity.
Ryan, did you have anything else you wanted to add on this?
No, I think you covered it well, thank you.
And I actually really like the changes, because in the intent of the amendment, as suggested by the citizens, was they did not want to have rentals and influx. And then here, this went even farther with sales and repairs, and that seemed a little excessive to me anyways. But with that said, I
Okay.
could take a motion. Councilmember Smith, or Dennehy.
Go ahead.
Dennehy, you want to take a
Okay.
turn at it?
Yeah, absolutely. Madam Mayor and Council, I'd like to make a motion that we cease on ordinance 12, moratorium on UTV.
Oh, you want to cease on that? Might be easier if you just move that we,
Disapprove.
just approve it.
That
so
we
then can vote no.
disapprove, that we disapprove ordinance 12, moratorium on UTV businesses.
Second.
So
Roll it.
the motion has been
To approve.
to approve ordinance 12, series of 22 as it is. Did you move
He said disapprove.
to disapprove it?
Yeah.
Okay, so that makes it a little more confusing.
Vote yes to disapprove.
So if
So
you
now we
want
vote
to
yes.
disapprove this, you vote yes. We can handle that.
Roll it.
Sure.
Come on, we all know the function.
Is there any discussion by council? All right, so we're going to take a roll call. If you wish to disapprove this ordinance, vote yes.
Right.
Councilmember Dennehy?
Yes.
Councilmember Worthington.
Yes?
Councilmember Schmisher.
Aye.
Councilmember B. Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Stein.
Aye.
Councilmember Tracy.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Aye.
All right, it has been disapproved. All right, thank you, council. I now move the time over to Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick to make a motion for an executive session.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the city council enter into executive sessions for the following purposes. Executive session to receive legal advice on specific legal questions pursuant to CRS 24-6-4024B concerning options for providing electric power to the city.
Second.
So been a motion and a second. Any discussion? Call vote.
Councilmember Dennehy.
Aye.
Councilmember Worthington.
Aye.
Councilmember Schmisher.
Aye.
Councilmember B. Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Stein.
Aye.
Councilmember Tracy.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Aye.
All right, we are moving into executive session. Thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it.